Um, now I am very happy to introduce Keith Tyson, who's our Deputy State Director for Alabama, for the Nature Conservancy in Alabama. And he's been with the Nature Conservancy for 30 years. He's been in South Carolina, Georgia, and most recently and most longly, Alabama. He's also our fire manager, and he has 25 years worth of experience in fire and prescribed fires. And today we're going to learn about prescribed fire exchange in Africa. So Keith, take it away.
All right, thank you, Olivia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so so as Olivia mentioned, today we're going to talk about our international fire exchange with a focus on our Zambia Kafue National Park project. The Nature Conservancy in Arkansas is the lead on this project, and they started about 8 years ago, and I'm very fortunate to have gotten involved a couple years ago. So I'm just going to give a little background first. So as many of you on here have heard, beneficial fire is really important to many of the ecosystems around the world, and here in Alabama. And so the Nature Conservancy has been really involved in, particularly in the US, but also getting more involved in other countries around the world in restoring beneficial fire to those ecosystems, to manage those ecosystems. So the Nature Conservancy in the US has a pretty big fire program. As you can see, we're currently averaging well over 100,000 acres a year of burns that we implement throughout the country, and this is on par with some of the other federal agencies like the National Park Service and BLM. We're also really focused on assisting our partners in implementing more fire around the country. As you can see from this chart, these were 2019 numbers, and we assisted in about 287,000 acres around the country, with almost half of that being on US forest, on our national forest lands. In Alabama, so we've had a fire program since about 2000, and we are finally to the point that we hire about 2 to 4 seasonal fire crews per year. We not only manage our nature preserves, but we also have partnerships with the U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and our state agencies to help them implement fire. And we're currently averaging anywhere from 40 to 60,000 acres a year in Alabama, where we're assisting our partners in implementing more prescribed or controlled burning beneficial fire. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus today on this international fire exchange. I just want to call out my good friend McCree Anderson here, pictured with me in Africa. He's been leading this program for the last 8 years, and he also leads an international exchange with Brazil as well. And so each year, so part of the exchange is actually bringing people from these other countries to Arkansas, where they spend a week implementing a little bit of fire, but also meeting a lot of the partners like the U.S. Forest Service and others, and really learning about the fire that we do in the U.S. so that they can help compare that to their homeland. This was 2 years ago, and I went to Arkansas and participated with this exchange, and these are half Brazilians and half Zambians that were on that particular tour. So today we're going to focus on Zambia and the Kafue National Park. So Zambia is let me get my little pointer here. Zambia is a country in central South Africa, landlocked, sort of right in the middle there, that dark blue that you see on the African peninsula there. Here's a blow up of the country, and we're going to focus on the Kafue National Park, where I work. focuses there. So Kafue National Park was established in the 1950s. It's approximately 5.5 million acres. So that's that's similar to the size of the state of Massachusetts, just for scale. An incredible place. Named for the Kafui River, which sort of runs right through the middle and on the edge of the Kafui National Park. One of the neat things is known to contain 55 species of mammals, and so that's a huge number compared to a lot of our national parks and landscapes in the U.S. Relatively unknown compared to some of the other larger parks around Africa. It's for that reason, it's relatively unexplored still, and there's large areas that are unknown and still very wild. So the big issue that we actually have in the Kafui is too much fire in the wrong time of the year. Historically, the fire season would have been right before the end of, or right at the end of the dry season, right before the wet season started, when a few thunderstorms started appearing. But in more recent times, a lot of the almost 60, anywhere from 60 to 80% of the Kafui burns every single year, mostly by man-induced fires. And what's happening is they're really occurring in the hottest and driest period of the year. Zambia has a really defined wet season and a really defined dry season. So from about December through early May, it's a very wet season, and that when that ends, all the rain shuts off until you start getting a few showers and storms in November timeframe. So really early October is the hottest and driest time of the year, and that's when August and October are when most of these fires are occurring. A lot of the fires are actually coming off of these, what they're called game management areas. If you look at the surrounding the park are these game management areas that are owned by the different chiefdoms, or that are managed by the different chiefdoms of the native peoples around the park. And so a lot of the fires actually come off of those parks, or come off of those game management areas associated with poaching, associated with agriculture and other things. The two major ecosystem types on the Kafui National Park are the Mambo Woodlands and the Dambo wetlands. While there are other community types, these are the two predominant types, both grass dominated ecosystems. You know, a lot of people would refer to this as African savanna. So our strategy here has really been focused on early burning to help control these massive late season, dry season wildfires. While this was not the natural season for fire, we can use fire to help control fire later on in the season, and also create a refugia for wildlife. So what we have been preaching over there is to conduct these controlled burns or beneficial fire use right after the wet season ends. So in the May to June timeframe, when the grasses are still fairly green, they're a lot easier to control these fires, and there's still enough moisture in the ground that it really greens up quickly after these fires. This is all a wildlife strategy more than anything. When these fires occur in the hottest and driest times of the year, and thousands of acres burn, there's not any food for the animals to forage on. And so by creating some areas where we burn early and the grass greens up, we have created a refugia for these wildlife to survive these really hot wildfires later in the season. So as I mentioned, for about 8 or 9 years now, that Nature Conservancy has been going over to Africa and teaching these workshops. And so this is one of the main areas in the Kafui. This is Chunga. This is where they do a lot of training for their wildlife police. And so they already had the facilities there. And so we've been doing these workshops with usually like around 30 to 40 people that travel from all of the different sectors all around the Kafui. In recent years, they've actually started coming from some of the game management areas as well, which as I mentioned, is where a lot of the wildfires are coming from. So it's really good that they're getting involved in that. In these workshops, multiple things are taught, but it really gives, the first thing is it really gives an opportunity for all the different sectors to come together and talk about what was accomplished in the previous fire season. And so since they started doing these workshops, as part of the workshops, they create fire plans on what they want to burn in the next year, or what they want to accomplish as far as their system of fire breaks, to protect areas of forest and basically divide the Kafui up with fire breaks and natural breaks, so that they can help control those later season really hot fires. A big part of what the Nature Conservancy has done too is when we first started, they didn't really have any tools. They were actually using bunches of grass to burn with. They would bunch up a bunch of grass and carry it as long as they could. They had they had sticks and branches that they were beating the fire out with. And so over that last 8 years, we've brought hundreds and hundreds of tools, drip torches, which you see here, the main tools that we implement fire with in the US. What they call fire beaters, we call flappers in the US. These are a little bit bigger than you would find in the US. But that's basically used to stomp the fire out, or mop the fire. Basically, you can mop it right along the edge of the fire with that. And then these bladder bags, which enable them to carry water on their backs. As I mentioned, another big part is really planning out what they're going to be doing the next year, but also to plan out a live burn exercise that we are able to go out and implement in the field. This really enables them to really think through the whole process of this. This gentleman here was the burn boss for that day, and so he was able to figure out what resources he had and divide those out. And then we went out and implemented a controlled burn on the property there, early season burn. Some of the other strategies that they're really using. So throughout the Kafui, there are multiple lodges. This is for tourism and other facilities. And so they'll actually use these, what they're calling black lining, or this is a fire break that's created by burning. And so if you go out, they'll do miles and miles of these. If you go out early in the early season, they're much more easy to control. And so they can actually burn these defined areas without it getting out of control. Another strategy they have is, this is the M9 highway, which is the longest highway running through the middle of the Kafui. And early in the season, they'll just go hundreds of miles down this highway lighting fire. And it will, in most cases, it will go out fairly early in the evening, not far from the highway. And so that creates this really long linear fire break, where a lot of the fires are started, as you know, in the US by cigarettes and other sparks of cars and that sort of stuff. Obviously, there's a lot more challenges to burning over there than there are in the US. The very first time I went out on that burn, this is the sign that I saw out there. So obviously, we don't have lions or big predators to worry about on our burns, but over there, they always have an armed guard that basically follows them around when they're doing these burns, just in case there's a wildlife encounter. The goal is not to kill wildlife, obviously, to scare them away, but they would kill them if they had to. So with that, I'm going to show some of the beauty of this country, some of the wildlife that we saw there. Again, it was a really incredible experience. I got to spend 2 seasons there, a total of 4 weeks. And hopefully, we were planning on going back this past May, and then COVID hit. So hopefully we're going to be able to go this next year, maybe in October after the travel restrictions are released. So this is a Musikesi camp, which is one of my favorite places over there. It's on this it's a small camp, 4 or 5 tents, that is on this what they call Eden, which is basically it's a wetland lagoon off of the Kafui River. And as this dries throughout the summer, it's still got a lot of moisture and the richest greenest grasses, and so it attracts all the wildlife. So there'll be, as it dries, there'll be hundreds of elephants and zebra, and it's a very rich lion area. It's a pretty incredible area, and I would highly recommend, if you're going to go to the Kafui, that you look up Musikesi camp and try to get a reservation there. This was there was actually 2 young leopards as we were driving down the road that were sitting on this tree that was overhanging the road, and this one hung around long enough for a picture. So that was a pretty incredible experience. I was able to see, in the 2 years, I was able to see at least three or four additional leopards, adult leopards, but these were the only young ones that we saw. This was the highlight of really my 2 years there, was seeing these cheetahs. Cheetahs are fairly rare, and we just happened to find these. There was actually 4 of them, and they were all siblings, and they were in a burn that had just occurred the day before. These are great crowned cranes, which is a large crane that you see in random places in kind of little wetland depression areas throughout the park. Red spots are actually dragonflies that were sunning on the crocodile as well there. These are white-fronted bee eaters. And these were on the banks of the Zambezi River, and they actually nest in the banks along the river there. Red hartebeest, which is one of the 55 mammal species that occur on the park. Impalas are probably the most common species, and these are oxpeckers that ride on the backs of the animals and take advantage of the flies that are attracted to the animals there. And these are a really rare bird, becoming more and more rare because they require these vast areas of well-burned grasslands. And this is the southern hornbill, and so these occur in little familial pods of 3 to 4, 5 birds, and they actually mostly feed on the ground, similar to our eastern turkeys, and they roost in trees at night. Warthogs were fairly common in some places. And these are another antelope species called puku, and they were fairly common as well throughout. Hippos, very common in the along the rivers, and where that picture of where I was looking at that elephant, when that lagoon is really wet, all night long as you're laying in your tent, you just hear these hippos walking and crunching on the grasses. It's almost like the sound of it is so loud, it's almost deafening how many hippos are out there. And so of the 2 years, this is the only picture I got of a lion. And it was a neat story about this, is we were just about to get out and walk into this grassy area to look at it for the lodge owner, to see if we could conduct a controlled burn in there. And this lion just stood up probably like 30 yards from us, and we decided we should go back to the vehicle after that. So, and then just a few sites here. This is Victoria Falls, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. This is down near Livingston on the Zimbabwe-Zambia border. Really hard to get a picture of it because this waterfall just goes on and on. Really incredible, amazing place. can't, most of the time when there's this much water, you can't really get a good picture either because there's so much spray, and they actually are renting raincoats as you go and walk the trails around this thing. And then this is on the lower Zambezi down there, not far from Victoria Falls. The sunsets in Zambia all over just incredible, amazing. The sky was always so clear when we were there because we were there in the dry season. Just amazing. And then this was actually a sunset I took from this really high rock outcrop that we hiked to near the Kafui. Just again, just a really beautiful country, and I encourage anybody, if you ever have an opportunity to go to the Kafui, it's well worth it. And with that, I will answer any questions in the chat. Olivia, if you want to.
Yeah, well, Steve Crockett asks a really good question. He says, is there any evidence of climate change in the park?
Yeah, so I guess that's a hard question to answer because there is so much human caused fire. I don't know. So we are actually looking at a carbon project there that basically measures the results of the early burning versus the late season burning to see how much carbon is released into the atmosphere. But I don't have a good answer for if there's examples of climate change just yet.
Well, I wondered about some logistics. How long does it take you to get there from Birmingham?
Yeah, so the longest part of the flight is from Atlanta, South Africa, nonstop, and it's a 12-hour flight. So it's quite miserable. It's really the worst. It's really the hardest thing to get through is to be on a plane that long.
And then do you fly where?
Then we fly from South Africa to Lusaka, which is the capital of Zambia.
And does it take you a long way to get to the Kafui from there? Or do you have vehicles already arranged and everything?
Yeah, so we have on the ground staff, Nature Conservancy staff in Zambia that pick us up and take us into the Kafui. It's about I'm trying to remember, it's not more than a couple hours into the heart of the Kafui from Lusaka.
And do most people that you're dealing with speak English, or do you have translators?
Yeah, so almost everyone in the country speaks English. It was a former British colony. But there is something like 50 something other languages. And so to each other, they speak their own native dialects most of the time, but they all I never ran into anybody that couldn't speak English.
That's convenient.
Yeah.
Becky asked that she says she's assuming that the trees are fire resistant.
Yes. Even when even with these really hot, dry season fires, for the most part, the trees have been burned every year, and so the fuel doesn't build up enough to completely, top kill the hardwood trees.
Great. Well, that's all of our questions, except there's another one about the animals adjusting to the fire time changes. Have they done so?
Well, so what really happened? So who's really bought into this early season burning are a lot of these lodges where they have what they do is they're called game drives. And so a big part of the tourism is in the morning, right before daylight, and then in the evening, you get on these Jeeps and you go on these game drives. And what the lodges have really learned is if they do these early season burning, that the entire area greens up, tracks all the wildlife, and it makes it much easier for them to see. As far as the late season burning, animal species in general are in the park are on a significant decline over time. A lot of that is due to poaching, but also due to the fact that there are long periods of time where they do not have much food to eat, and so it's really a struggle sometimes with these really hot season, warm season burns.
Well, we wish you well for this year. Hope that you will be able to go back to Zambia. And thank you so much, Keith. I want to remind all of you that whether it's in Africa or Alabama, conservation never stops. And we need your support. We need to keep our conservationists in the field doing this important work for climate and for nature. So please donate to the Nature Conservancy. And we have a slide to show you how to do that. And if you'd like to make a gift, just either you can do it online or you can call us or connect with us through philanthropy.alabama@tnc.org. And if you'd like to invite somebody to the next Nature Calls, then just you can either forward them the invitation that you get, or you can ask us to send one directly. So thank you very much for your support, and we hope we'll see you next time.